Welcome, everyone. I want to welcome you all to our webinar, Public Records, What Are They? My name is Sarah Van Gilder, and I'm the marketing manager here at Corporate Screening. I wanted to let you know that we're very pleased to be able to present this webinar to you today. Just a little bit of housekeeping to go ahead and begin. During the webinar, you're going to be muted. If you do have any questions that you want answered immediately, send them via the question box on the webinar screen. I'm going to monitor the questions throughout the presentation, and we're going to hold a question and answer period at the end of the session, so your question will probably be held until that time. But I just wanted to let you know if something comes up that you want answered immediately, just let me know. So at this time, I'm going to take a moment and introduce you to our presenter, Kevin Neudecker, who's the Quality and Compliance Manager here at Corporate Screening. Kevin's been a member of the Corporate Screening team for over 13 years, and he's FCRA Advanced Certified by the National Association of Professional Background Screeners, which is also known as the NAPBS, and Corporate Screening is part of that organization. In his role as compliance manager, Kevin develops policies and procedures to ensure corporate screening remains compliant with federal and state laws regarding background screening. He also oversees corporate screening's continued compliance with NAPBS accreditation standards, and he spearheaded corporate screening's effort to become one of the first accredited consumer reporting agencies with the NAPBS. So at this time, I'd like to turn the webinar over to Kevin, who's going to go over the information about public records. Kevin, it's all yours.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Happy Flag Day to everybody out there. So, we'll go through this here pretty quickly, I hope. So I think there might be some questions at the end. So we're here today to learn about public records for something that's, what the first thing people think of when they think of background screening. A lot of times there's a lot of mystery to what actually a public record is and some confusion. So hopefully we'll clear some of that up for you today. So public records in a general term can mean anything from criminal and civil records to property, marriage, divorce records, bankruptcy records. But the focus of this presentation will be on criminal records. So why is it important to have an understanding of the different types of criminal records? As you should be aware from some of our previous presentations, when there is a criminal record on a background report that you complete, there's certain steps that you have to take if you're going to be using that information to make a hiring decision. So one of those things is applying the green factors when conducting your individualized assessment. And those, again, as a reminder, are the nature and gravity of the offense, time that has passed since the offense, and the nature of the job held or sought. Basically, that's kind of comparing what kind of job is the person applying for, and is the criminal record that you found on them, does it apply to that job, or is it something that would be unrelated? So an example of that might be, the person has a DUI on their record from many years ago. They're not going to be driving for you, so does that criminal record that you found on them, does that relate to the job that they're going to have? So the EEOC recommends strongly that you conduct an individualized assessment when using criminal information, and also there are some states that have kind of enrolled that type of thought into their laws. Especially we see these kind of tacked on to ban the box legislation. So not only not asking the question on the front end, but then if you do obtain criminal information in the background report, there's certain things that you need to do with that information. So what type of records will you see in a background report that's completed by corporate screening? So what you'll see are convictions for a felony case. And a felony case is a serious offense carrying a possible penalty of incarceration from 1 year to life in a state prison or the death penalty. You're probably not going to see those types of sentences on the report that you get for somebody applying for a job, but felony cases are the most serious level of offenses. And then in New Jersey, they have what they call indictable offenses. They don't have felonies or misdemeanors because they just want it to be a little different. But the penalties for indictable offenses are similar to felony charges. And then misdemeanors, which is a crime punishable by a fine and or jail time of up to 1 year. And these are not felonies. Sometimes there's confusion or not an understanding that there's a distinction between those two levels of crimes. And again, having that understanding kind of goes back then to the, the green factors. So you have an understanding of the seriousness of the crime. You'll also see pending cases. So these are cases that have been filed with the court, but there has not been a final decision by the court as to the guilt of the defendant. So if they're in the middle of that process when you're running a background, you'll see them as a pending case. A likely scenario where you see these sometimes are somebody has a case filed against them, they have a court date they don't go to, so the case, so then they end up with a warrant for their arrest, and while that warrant is out there, the case is still pending. So what won't you see from court records in one of our reports? So what you won't see are dismissed cases or dismissed charges. Again, this helps you as the employer, with the information that you need in order to make your decision. So if somebody has a charge brought against them and the case is dismissed, they've never been convicted of anything, you shouldn't be using that as a reason to not hire somebody. You won't see sealed or expunged cases. We don't see them either. They're actually hidden from public view. So usually these are cases that the person, they might have been convicted, but they've been able to have that removed from the court record through some court procedures. Often you'll see this in somebody who has kind of a minor offense when they were younger, and they have many years of good behavior, and they can apply with the courts to have those removed from their records. You also won't see juvenile records. Again, those are not available to the public in most areas. You will, on occasion, have somebody who was under the age of 18 when they went through a criminal proceeding that you might see in a report, and that's because they were tried within the adult court. Some states, it's under the age of 18, they'll still automatically send you to the adult court at like the age of 16 or so. There's actually a movement in many of those states that have those types of procedures to bump that age up to 18, so that people that are 16 and commit a crime will go to the juvenile court, unless of course it's a very serious offense that they decide to charge the person as an adult. But there are some states where at 16, if you commit a crime, even if it's a minor crime, you're going to the adult court. You also won't see levels that are below a misdemeanor. So, the courts deal with felonies and misdemeanors, but they also handle and the terminology varies by courts and jurisdictions, but they're called, infractions or violations, minor misdemeanors, traffic offenses, summary offenses, ordinance violations. These are all considered to be below a misdemeanor. In many areas, a conviction for these types of offenses are not even considered crimes, even though they go through a criminal court. So what you'll see are the felonies, the indictables, and the misdemeanors. So what resources that we, as corporate screening, use for searching criminal records? And we'll go through each one of these individually, but the main sources would be a national criminal record search, a federal court, a state repository, or a county court. And county courts have an upper court and then usually several lower courts. So it's important to understand that a national criminal record search is not a court search. So when you are a client that has a national as part of your package, we're not searching a court. It's actually a database that compiles millions of criminal records into a single source. It does not have information from every court in the country. Many courts won't share that information. There's no way for it to be compiled. But it is an effective way to augment your public record searches. Because it's just not reasonable to conduct a search in every county in the country, and this is a good way to cover a wide area. So if it's not an actual court search, any hit that we get when we do a national search, we then go to the court of record to make sure that the information is accurate and up to date. The reason that we do that, the main reason is to be compliant with the Fair Credit Reporting Act, but the information that's in that database may not be up to date. The person may have gotten the case dismissed or sealed or expunged since the time that it ended up in that database. So that's why the process is, okay, there's something in this court, now we've got to go to the court to see if it's still there and make sure there's, everything is up to date before reporting it to you as the employer. So we have federal courts. Federal courts are separate from, your county courts that you're probably familiar with. So federal courts are, that's where cases are heard for violations of the Constitution or federal laws or crimes committed on federal land. So, if you commit a crime like an Indian reservation, you're likely to go through a federal court. Other crimes like bank robbery, racketeering, drug trafficking, crimes across state lines. We always hear those, in the police shows, if somebody, kidnaps somebody and they cross the state line, it becomes a federal case. That's where the precedent comes for that plot point. So while federal courts do hear serious crimes, less than 10% of criminal cases go through federal court. So a vast majority of criminal cases are heard at your local county and lower courts. So there's 94 different district courts in the country. So a case in federal court can be heard in any one of those districts, but they tend to, the cases tend to be heard where the offense occurred. The problem that we have as researchers into federal court records is they don't make identifiers apparent in what we can readily see. So whenever we do a federal court search and there's maybe just a name match on somebody, there's a lot of research that goes in to figure out if that record actually belongs to the person that we're doing a background on. So you'll see when we get to some of the other, how we conduct some of the other courts, those identifiers like the date of birth or maybe even a social security number or an address are readily apparent. For federal courts, we kind of have to dig through sometimes hundreds of pages trying to look for a reference to where the person lived or maybe where they worked or a reference to their date of birth. It isn't in a specific spot on those. And if you're not doing federal searches as part of your background, you may wish to consider doing that. Again, it's a small percentage of criminal cases, but the cases that go through there can be, pretty serious crime. There's also state repositories. State repositories are a consolidation of criminal records from, the entirety of a state. Not all states offer this type of search or have this type of database available to them. And then in many states, the only way to search them is through fingerprints. So more than likely, you may be in a state where doing this type of search just isn't feasible, or you don't want to incur the expense of fingerprints, or there's just reasons you can't do it. But there are several states where this could be a good viable option for you to have as part of your background screening program, so that you're not just searching the counties where the person's lived in your particular state. You can search the entire state. So the county court search. This is the most common type of criminal record search that we do, and I'd say any background screening company does. There are 3,200 counties, or nearly 3,200 counties in the United States. So they each have their own court. So that's a lot of courts. And most county court systems consist of an upper court that hears your felony level cases, and then several lower courts which hear the misdemeanor level cases. So here's kind of the basic court structure. You've got and again, this is see there's kind of different names for the same type of courts, and depending on what state you're in. Some places their singular county court is called a state court. It doesn't mean it's the entire state. It's just a court within the state. Some places call it a common pleas court. Some places call it a superior court. So you're probably familiar with the courts in your area with what they're referring to, but the names are different depending on what part of the country. And then you have your lower courts, which are also called municipal, district, or general sessions courts. And these are the courts where you see your misdemeanor, your traffic cases, and infractions go through these lower courts. And then there are, in some jurisdiction, there are these what are called the ancillary courts. They're kind of work independent of the other court structure there. So there's some cities that have what they call a mayor's court. If you live in a city or you drive through a city, that's the one that has a reputation for always pulling people over and having those speed traps so they can give people tickets and get the $150, $200 for the ticket. Likely that's going through a mayor's court. In Texas, they have what's called a hot checks court, which is for people run through that court that have bad checks. If they reach a level of it really being a serious crime, if they're doing it over and over again, you're going to see them up at the one of the lower courts. But it is a kind of just a separate court system that they have down there in Texas. And then there are what are called drug courts, and this is really an alternative for people to, give them an opportunity to avoid going through the regular criminal justice system. These are for people that have been arrested for drug possession or convicted of drug possession, and it's a way for them to go through a formal court process, but maybe not have that reflected on like a criminal record. A lot of times they go into this court and they're given very strict parameters for like a drug rehabilitation program and rules that they need to follow. And if they do that, then their case will be dismissed. So usually those operate outside of the regular court system. And again, the courts usually reserve the right, if they're not following the program, that the case will end up at one of the criminal courts that you're going to search as part of your background. So how are searches conducted? This is a common misperception of how searches are done. A lot of people think that we just go to a computer system and we plug in somebody's social security number and we get back all this information of every time this person's ever had any interaction with the court. But that's just not how it works. The U.S. court system is very fractured and it's not uniform. They're not all the same. There's a lot of commonalities, but each jurisdiction is unique, especially when it comes to how we access the records. So when we conduct a search here, what we're actually searching is the court docket. The court docket is a list of the actions during a court case. So you'll see, the charges that the person was charged with, if they made any pleas, if they were convicted, and what the sentencing is. That docket does not include specific information related to a charge. So, for example, somebody might be convicted of theft, but the docket's not going to tell us like they stole, $300 worth of clothes from Walmart. It's going to say just, theft. Sometimes it'll give you a greater than or less than amount, so you might see theft less than $500 or theft greater than a certain amount. If you needed those types of details for any reason to confirm, a story that somebody told on a claimed record, that is something that can be done. We can look to actually pull the case file that may or may not have those details. A lot of times those details, especially after a certain amount of time, aren't available any longer. Bring this up because sometimes we do get questions from clients that want to know very specific information about a particular criminal case. And in order to do that, it's really a different type of search. But something that we can look into doing for you if need be. So like I said, there's a lot of different ways that we access court records. Every court can kind of make their own rules on how to get court records. I mean, in general, it need to be public information, but how they make that information public, kind of up to the court itself. So a lot of courts, their information is available online. Often when people find out what I do, they want to find out like, oh, what would you find on me, or could you look up my neighbor and stuff like that. And tell them, well, yeah, you can do that too. You just kind of need to know where to look and what you're looking at, which is usually the knowledge that people don't necessarily have. So these online courts, they make their court records available to the public, that anybody sitting at home on a computer, anywhere with internet access, can search their records. And they also give, all of that docket information I was talking about. And then some of them also will include, links to PDFs of the actual court documents. So you might see, the police report or some of those other types of details that you wouldn't see just on the recording on the docket. The problem that we run into as researchers is there's movement by many courts to remove identifying information off of these websites. They're balancing the privacy of the defendants with, the public's right to know this information. So a lot of them will remove, a date of birth or an address. So as you can imagine, we get somebody with a common name. and these things that differentiate, one John Smith from another aren't available. So then we have to, do some additional search to try to figure out if the person we're researching is the same person that belongs to this court case. Other courts provide what's called a court index search. Basically, this is just, more often than not, it's just a name search. You punch in somebody's name and it'll tell you if they've got a case matching that name. And that's basically, depending on the court, might be all the information that you get. So if we're searching kind of an uncommon name and we run that name at the court, it might come back and say we have nothing on a person with that name. A more common name, there's a chance we'll get something back saying, yeah, we have this, these 3 cases that belong to this person, or we have, 1 to 10 cases belonging to this name, and then we've got to do additional research to again figure out if this belongs to the person we're doing a background on. Sometimes that requires us to have somebody go into the court and request a copy of the court docket or the court files. There's also courts that the only way to search them is to actually go in the court. They don't have any information available, online. So a person has to go into the court and do the search themselves. So some courts will have a terminal in the area of the court records where you can do the search and find out if there is a case file associated with that person, and then have the clerks get the file for you. And then there's also a clerk search. So this means that somebody has to go into the court and then give the information to a clerk behind a desk, and then they'll look in their system and tell you if there's any matching information. And then some courts will allow you to mail in or fax in these types of searches. So we kind of went through all the different ways that we conduct the searches. I think you'll see if you had questions as to why some areas, when you guys are doing backgrounds, why some court searches come back really fast, and why some just take a long time, even if it comes back and there's no record on the person. So when we get a result or don't get a result, sometimes that leads to questions. So one that we do get from time to time is, why didn't you find a criminal record that a person claimed on their application, or you can find reference to something on just a Google search. So this can happen for several reasons. Each one can end up being unique, but often there's a more than reasonable explanation as to why it doesn't return on just a regular court search. So the crime that the person claimed may have occurred in an area that wasn't covered in the background. So it could have occurred, in a county that didn't show up on their Social Security number trace. So it wasn't a county that was searched as part of their background. They could have been, on vacation, or just far outside of their residence area. And again, this is why it can be good to add that National Criminal Record Search to your background package to kind of cast a little bit of a wider net. The case that they're claiming may have been sealed or dismissed, or the charge might be less than a misdemeanor. If you're still asking the criminal question on your application, a lot of times people feel the need to be as honest as possible in that question, and you can understand that. And they'll sometimes disclose information that they don't need to disclose anymore. If they've had a record sealed, let's say, I've seen many people that still claim that information, even though part of the reason they have a case sealed is so that you don't have to disclose that you've been convicted of a crime. So you certainly see that occur from time to time. So another reason that this can happen is the case may be from a lower court within the county that was searched. So if you remember that diagram we showed before with the upper court in a county and then the lower courts, in some counties, those lower courts, those records aren't indexed together with the upper courts. Some counties they are. So, for example, we're in Cleveland, which is in Cuyahoga County. There's our common pleas court, and then there's 13 individual municipal courts within the county, and all of those courts have their own records, and they don't share them with the upper court or any of the other lower courts. So if you want to do a search on me to find out if I've ever had an incident in any one of the courts in Cuyahoga County, you need to do 14 different court searches. And again, you know, some counties are structured like that, others aren't. But sometimes what we see is this occurring where these, you know, the county court search is part of the package, and then the record is in one of these lower courts where the records are not at the county level. And again, that's again where the national search can help, because they often have a lot of information on the lower courts. So if you do a national on me, you're going to get a lot of those lower courts are going to be included in that national search. So understanding when you do see a criminal record reported in one of our reports, you know, it's helpful to understand what that information is telling you. And again, this all goes back to, you know, if you want to apply this information in making a hiring decision. So you can see a filing date. This is the date that the charges were formally filed with the court. There's a lot that can go on before that. You know, could be investigation, grand jury, you know, indictments and all that, but the filing date is the date that the charges were formally read into the court. You'll see the type of crime. It'll tell you if the crime is a felony, a misdemeanor, or an indictable. And sometimes, depending on the court, you might get the level of the felony. So you might see like a felony second degree. And then you'll see the disposition. This is the ultimate finding of the court. So, you know, if somebody's found guilty, the court has to find them guilty. If somebody pleads guilty, they're not actually found guilty, and the court says, you know, accept your plea, and we find you guilty. So really, the two dispositions that you'll see in our report, since you won't see, you know, dismissed or anything like that, you'll see either guilty or pending. So the reports also include sentencing details. So these are the penalties imposed on a person after they've been found guilty. So this may include like fines or costs, probation requirements, which can be, you know, they might have to go to counseling, they might have to submit to drug testing. You know, generally they have to stay out of, you know, any kind of trouble with the law, and will indicate if they've been sentenced to jail or prison as a result of the guilty conviction. Oftentimes, the items that somebody is sentenced to can be suspended by the court. You'll often see this with jail time. So they might be sentenced to 1 year in jail, but the jail time is suspended. So the court is not requiring the defendant to spend any time in jail at the time of sentencing, but they can oppose that sentence if they don't follow other requirements of their probation. So if they don't attend the classes that they're supposed to, if they fail a drug test, if they commit another crime, or if they fail to pay their fines, the court will come back and tell them, all right, we're going to impose your jail sentence now. So it's just a note about the jail and prison time you might see on a sentencing. This doesn't necessarily reflect the amount of time the amount of actual time a person may have spent in jail or prison. It's rarely reflected in the court record. Usually, once you get into the you know, the prison system, then they handle the you know, the time spent. So that's those specific details are usually kept somewhere besides the court records. And then, you know, defendants are often released prior to completing the entirety of the sentence imposed. You know, it's not just the celebrities you hear about that get sentenced to 30 days and get out after a day. You know, it happens to others as well, often because of overcrowding or, you know, the cost of housing defendants. So you'll see somebody might be sentenced to 30 days jail, and after 4 or 5 days, they might get released. So some common questions that we get when people are reviewing a criminal record portion of a report. What is deferred adjudication? This is also known as, depending on the jurisdiction, might be called adjudication withheld or deferred judgment or diversion. So this means that the court is withholding a final finding on the case. So they're not finding the person guilty. They're entered into a program where they have to follow certain guidelines similar to what they might get if they were on probation. So they might have to, you know, pass drug tests or just stay out of trouble. It can vary depending on the court. Once they meet all their obligations, more than likely, and probably 100% of the time, the court's going to then dismiss the case. So they never found the person guilty. The case stayed pending, and they met their requirements, and the case gets dismissed. This gives people an opportunity, if they have a run-in with the law, and like they've never had any trouble before, courts at their discretion might allow this type of procedure to occur. It's more common in some areas than in others, so it can just depend on where the person lives if they're given the opportunity to do this. And then sometimes there's some confusion over what a particular charge means. A lot of laws, they might be based on like old English law, and some of the nomenclature hasn't been updated for modern times. So if you see a charge on a case and you're not sure what it means, don't be afraid to ask us. We're more than happy to help you with that. And again, that if you're applying your individualized assessment, you need to know what that charge is in order to make a proper assessment. So some of the ones that we see that confuse people or not sure about, sometimes one is importuning. That's solicitation of a minor. Larceny, just another word for theft. Petite theft, which is just a minor theft. And uttering, which is forgery, fraud, or bad checks. Most often we see that type of charge with somebody that's been passing bad checks. So another question we get from time to time, or a question you may ask yourself, we might be working on the background, and the public record, the criminal record search is taking a little bit longer on this one than it normally does. And we say, it's requiring additional research while we try to determine, if this record belongs to your person. So does this mean that your applicant has had a criminal record or a criminal court case? And strongly tell you that no, that does not mean your person has ever had any problems with the law. The initial search could have just been like a name match. The initial search could have brought back a hit that does belong to your person, but it's something like a civil case or just a traffic violation. But we don't know that until we can actually get into the court and get that search completed. And again, you shouldn't base your employment decision on speculation. So you should really just base it on what comes back in that report. So if you you got an applicant and we find a criminal record on them, and they're given that information, and they say, this doesn't belong to me, or this case was dismissed, or this wasn't a conviction, what should you do? You should know that the applicants have a right to dispute any of the information in their report. So if an applicant does express that to you, you should notify us that the information is being disputed by the applicant, and we'll reinvestigate the information. I find that sometimes when I talk to applicants that have had criminal records reported on them, sometimes it just takes an explanation to them, and then they understand what occurred. Sometimes the unfortunate conversation I have with applicants is they say, well, my lawyer said if I did this, it would be taken care of. And what they're being told is, if they plead guilty to like a plea bargain, they won't have to go to jail. They'll just have to be on probation, and it will be taken care of. What's maybe not conveyed to them properly by their counsel is that they're still going to have a criminal record on their record. So just a few reminders as we're wrapping up here. You should complete an individualized assessment before denying employment, promotion, or retention based on a criminal record in one of our reports. If you do use a criminal record to deny employment, you must follow adverse action procedures. We had a presentation a few months ago about that, but if you have any questions ever about adverse action, don't be afraid to ask us. It's probably the most important thing that you as the employer needs to do in the background screening process and the relationship with corporate screening. And also, applicants have a right to dispute information in their report. So anytime that they express that they don't think the information that's in our report is correct, they do have rights under federal law that we need to follow. So think that's it. I don't know if, Sarah, if anybody has any questions.
Yep, we've got a few questions. I want to thank you, Kevin, for making this presentation. I also wanted to take a moment to thank everybody who's at the webinar. And I want to remind you that if you do have any questions about the presentation, you can go ahead and type it in the question box. If you have additional questions that you think of later on, we're going to be sending a follow-up email message to webinar attendees, and it'll have our contact information in it. You can also contact Kevin directly at the information that's listed on the slide. His phone number is 800-229-8606. His extension is 323, or you can email him at knewdecker@corporatescreening.com. I just wanted to let you know that we've got additional webinars coming up each month. They're held on the second Wednesday at 2 p.m. The next one will be on July 12th, and it will review business background screening. So if you have any interest, we invite you to join us for it. So I'm going to go over a few questions that we've received. Kevin, can a criminal record be seen in other states? Can you go over that a little bit more?
I'm not sure I understand the question completely, but no. I mean, in general, no. I mean, each court has their own records, so they don't. You can't really do a search in Ohio and get back records in a different state. The only real compiling that there is that kind of the national database that we talked about in the presentation.
Thank you. I've got another question. My applicant had said for the record on their report that they were never arrested and they never had to go to court. How could that happen?
That can happen, and this would be usually a minor offense. This can happen, sometimes you'll see it in if you're in a park after dark, you might get a citation similar to a speeding ticket, and what most people would do with that is they'll take it and they'll look at the back and sign it and send in the $50, $100, $200, whatever it is, and be done with it. What they don't realize sometimes is that they're actually pleading to a misdemeanor when they do that. Again, there aren't a lot of jurisdictions where that is necessarily the case, but I've definitely seen that happen where somebody gets a citation like that, and they don't realize that it's going to appear in a court record as having been found guilty of a misdemeanor.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions. The next question that I have is, if I do a public record search, do I have to do the same public record search for all of my candidates, including volunteers?
Well, in general, I'd say that you should have consistency in your programs amongst your different types of employment that you have. So you may have a certain criteria for your entry-level people, as opposed to if you're hiring a new CEO. I would say you would probably want to remain consistent within those kind of those rings that you have amongst your staff. So if you're doing background reports on your environmental services, you want to make sure that those are consistent amongst people applying for that department or that that particular job. But then if you're you've got people that might be handling money, or they're going to have some major responsibilities within the organization, you can have different types of background checks. You just want to stay consistent in those positions. So you don't want to have two people applying for the same position that are given different background criteria.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions, and I do invite people that if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out and type it into the question box. Did you say, this is a clarification question, Kevin, did you say lower court records would be covered in a national search, but they aren't necessarily covered in county court search? Can you clarify? Yeah,
so the national database, again, it's thousands of sources and millions of records, and often they are able to compile records from a lot of the lower courts in a particular county. And then if you're just searching a county court by itself, you may not, depending on the county, you may not get all of the records that are in those various lower courts. So again, like in the example of the county that we're in Cuyahoga, there's 13 municipal courts, and they all keep their own records. So if you go to Cuyahoga County website and do a search, you won't be searching all of the municipal courts that are in that county. You're just searching the upper court, which is where the felony cases, the serious crimes are heard. But there might be some other counties when you go to the county to do the search. The search is not only searching the upper level court where the felony cases are, but also it has information on all of their lower courts as well.
Thank you. I've had a couple of people who have asked if they can get a copy of the presentation. The presentation, I will post it on our website and a PDF copy of it, and I will also get the webinar up in the next few days as well, so there will be a link to it. And then when you get your follow-up email, it will also contain a link to the presentation so that you can get it that way too. It'll be the PDF. I've got one other question, but I do invite you, if you've got additional questions, to go ahead and type them in. Kevin, if I do more court searches, will it slow down my background results?
No. I mean, again, as you, it can depend on just kind of the luck of the draw sometimes as to, what courts are being searched. So you can do you could only be doing one, county search, but if it's in a county that, a person has to go into the court to do the search, or it's a common name, that can cause the delays. So, depending on the courts, you can do the look, kind of the look and draw of the person, where the person's lived, and the commonality of their name. You could do 100 searches that would take you the same amount of time to do one. So doing more won't necessarily, I guess it would increase your chances of running into a court that's just tougher to search and takes a little bit longer, but it's not going to specifically make your backgrounds take longer just by doing more searches.
Thank you. At that time, that's the last question that I have. I'm just going to review Kevin's contact information one more time. You can reach him by phone at 800-229-8606. His extension is 323, or you can email him at knewdecker@corporatescreening.com. I want to once again thank everybody for attending the webinar. We will have the information posted on our website, and you'll get some links to it. And I want to also thank you, Kevin, for your time in presenting it. So we're going to close it out, and I wanted to wish everybody a good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.